Hello, I'm Dango Rose. Welcome to the Mountaineer Podcast, where everybody's listening. The Mountaineer brings you the latest news of the Peak to Peak region, in print, online, through our podcast, social media, and special publications. Now, listen in to the latest news of the area with our local journalists.
A recent letter sent to Governor Jared Polis from the United States Department of Health and Human Services sent shockwaves to child care centers across the state, including to Nederland. On January 6th, DHHS announced it will be freezing funds for 3 federal programs: the Child Care and Development Fund, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, and Social Services Block Grant, due to unsubstantiated allegations of fraud. The state estimates it could lose out on up to $91 million in child care funding for 2026. In Nederland, Teens Inc. says it could lose all their funding for child care assistance, nearly $4,000 a month. The organization struggled to fundraise in 2025 and has cut back on staffing, reduced hours, and had some difficulty raising money for its new $7 million facility, which broke ground in August. According to director Stephen Lefevre, they're planning for 2026 to be even worse. Welcome to the Mountaineer Podcast. I'm Tyler Hickman. We have quite a bit of news to get through before our main segment, so stick with us for this packed episode. And speaking of packed, this week's sponsor, Eldora Mountain, says stay away from the busy interstate mountains. Skip the epic traffic on I-70 and head to Eldora for good vibes all season long. Eldora is your go-to spot for nonstop winter fun, with great local skiing and riding, plus slopeside DJs and an après music series. Don't miss the Full Moon Ski Tour, the Timbers Rail Jam, or the morning uphill grind. Get all the details and check out weekly events at eldora.com. See you on the mountain. For today's featured segment, our resident history buff, Maryann Rosen, brings you the story behind a women's vacation movement, which created a pipeline sending Chicago professionals straight to Gold Hill's bluebird skies in the early 20th century. But before we get into it, here are this week's News Bites. Black Hawk City Council swore in 2 new aldermen at its January 14th meeting to replace 2 members, Gregory Moats and Linda Armbright, who both died while in office last fall. Retired Community Development Director Cynthia Linker and Lorraine Wiley were selected to fill their seats, both of which will be up for election this year. Also, the town of Nederland announced it has received its demolition permit for the wreckage of the Caribou Village Fire. The permitting process has been marred in red tape for months since the October 9th fire destroyed the shopping center, which housed roughly 20 local businesses. Since then, the pile of refuse has sat largely untouched behind a chain-link fence. Town manager Jonathan Kane said he expects business owners to be allowed to search the debris for belongings in the next few days. The town has also approved the financial structure for its purchase of Eldora Mountain, inching closer still to finally sealing the deal. The town will issue and sell revenue bonds, repayable solely from the money the ski resort generates, to avoid taking on debts or passing the bill to local taxpayers. And finally, Boulder Falls will stay closed to visitors for the foreseeable future, the city announced recently, and a trail to the falls is likely gone forever. The falls have been closed since 2024 after a rock slide damaged the trail, and engineering analysis revealed very high risks for future rock falls at that exact spot. The city plans to build a viewing platform to allow the public back into the Boulder Falls area. Like many people driving up Boulder Canyon, curious about all the cars parked along the shoulder, I stopped here shortly after I first moved to Colorado 4 years ago. We were lucky and caught it on a foggy morning without much of a crowd. It was beautiful. Not a bad introduction to the Centennial State. So here's to hoping we can visit again sometime soon. And that's all for today's News Bites. As always, pick up a copy of this week's paper or head to the mtnear.com to read these stories and so much more. Now, I'm going to throw it to Maryann, who tells us how a couple teachers, a bluebird, and a love for the Colorado outdoors revitalized the spirits of Chicago's working women in the 20th century. A note for listeners, Maryann's retelling of the story heavily sources a 2021 article written by Dr. K. Ann Short for History Colorado. We'll include a link to Dr. Short's piece in the show's description. Here's Maryann.
I'm Maryann Rosen, bringing you history, lore, or stories from or about the mountains you live in. When you think of Colorado, or Boulder in the Peak-to-Peak area specifically, does Chicago, Illinois pop immediately into the forefront of your thoughts? Aside from possibly knowing someone who moved to the area from Chicago, or acknowledging the fact that there are tourists who visit from the Midwest, or the fact that Dango Rose, a founding member of Elephant Revival and longtime mountaineer friend and compatriot, was born, raised, and grew up in Chicago, the answer is probably no. Would it surprise you to know that the Chicago, Colorado colony was a late 19th century venture, primarily in 1870 and 1871, where Chicago businessmen financed a planned agricultural settlement in Colorado, leading to the founding of Longmont. This venture promoted ideals of temperance, industry, and morality, selling memberships to Midwesterners to build a community using communal resources. It was, however, all actually a speculation scheme tied to railroad development. Would it also amaze you to know that Dutch immigrants, some from the same areas as early Nederland settlers, also established vibrant communities in the Roseland and South Holland sections of Chicago, which meant cultural links and potentially family connections existed between these two communities. And that there is also a connection due to the fact that early Dutch farmers from Chicago moved west during the mining boom and gravitated to Nederland when the Caribou mine was owned and operated by a Dutch mining company, which gave the town its name. But it is another link between Chicago and Boulder and Gold Hill, Colorado, in our own Peak-to-Peak area that is the subject of this podcast story. It all began with the Chautauqua movement and a woman named Jean Sherwood. The Chautauqua movement was a transformative 19th and 20th century adult education movement begun in 1874, offering lectures, literature, music, drama, art, and recreational outdoor activities to rural communities. It blended arts, science, and civic engagement to expand education beyond formal schooling, making these subjects accessible to everyone. Jean Sherwood was a Chicago art teacher and philanthropist who became interested in the Chautauqua movement. Chicago and Colorado collided when in 1898, Sherwood, along with co-teacher and friend Matilda Vanderpool, attended the first Texas-Colorado Chautauqua season. Sherwood loved the natural scenery surrounding the emerging city of Boulder. With the educational and recreational philosophies of the National Chautauqua Movement and the self-supporting women of Chicago in mind, Jean Sherwood and a few friends created an organization eventually called the Bluebird Organization. It was a movement designed to offer vacations for secretaries, teachers, nurses, sales clerks, and any professional women of the time in order to escape the hot Chicago city summers and the hard work of their jobs. A place where women could find friendship, culture, art, and music, along with outdoor activities such as horseback riding, hiking, and mountain climbing. Sherwood decided after that trip to Boulder that Colorado would be an ideal spot. Although when Sherwood and Matilda Vanderpoel approached some of the Chicago Art Institute members for funding, most men believed that Colorado was too far for women to go on their own. Sherwood and Vanderpoel knew better. They, along with other Chicago colleagues, established the Holiday House Association to raise money, including through a $10 lifetime membership. In 1906, Sherwood purchased 4 lots at 12th Street and Park Avenue, now Baseline, near Chautauqua Park. They continued to raise funds in order to construct a vacation bungalow for the prospective visitors. In 1911, a 12-room gabled stone rubble bungalow designed by Boulder architect Arthur E. Saunders was built. It was one of the first houses built on a lush slope directly below Chautauqua Park. While under construction, a bluebird nest was found in the eave of the building. Bluebirds are small, social, vibrant birds who inhabit high elevations, sagebrush, and open country. Some are seasonal visitors, and some permanent residents of Colorado. Bluebirds were also a symbol of the women's suffrage movement. Considering all of the above, the cottage was named the Bluebird Cottage, and the organization became known as the Bluebird Movement. Literature, art, and music classes were to be held at the Boulder Chautauqua location, with hiking, horseback riding, outdoor recreation, and picnics to be enjoyed throughout the current peak-to-peak region, especially around the Gold Hill area. Women were chauffeured between Boulder and Gold Hill in a Model T stage used by A.J. Tim Walter. The journey on the steep dirt roads between Boulder and Gold Hill made for an exhilarating ride. Bluebird Cottage opened on June 15, 1911, and 43 women stayed that first summer. Bluebird bulletins listed events in Boulder and Gold Hill. The Bluebird Cottage and Lodge gave information about the trip from Chicago to Boulder and on to Gold Hill. Songbooks were issued to every member for singing occasions. Bluebird Cottage became a vacation destination for the early 20th century new woman, embracing culture and the natural world for recreation and forming friendships. Women enjoying independence and relaxation amid Colorado's spectacular Rocky Mountain landscapes. Imagine in the beginning how most bluebirds would be hiking, mountain climbing, camping, and horseback riding in long, full skirts. The Colorado climate was seen as a curative for long hours of indoor work. In 1916, Jean Sherwood's friend, the social reformer Jane Addams came to visit the Bluebird Cottage. Addams was known as a leader in social work and women's suffrage. She was one of America's foremost reformers. She was the co-founder of Hull House, one of America's most famous settlement houses in Chicago, providing extensive social services to the poor, largely immigrant families. Addams was so enamored of her stay that when she returned to Chicago, she began raising money for Bluebird scholarships so that more women could go. The cottage became so popular that more space was needed. In 1920, the association purchased the old hotel in Gold Hill and renamed it the Bluebird Lodge, providing additional space in this charming village located in the mountains above Boulder. The Bluebirds' permanent arrival in Gold Hill also began the preservation of Gold Hill, especially during the Depression years. The Bluebirds were instrumental in maintaining the historic structures as well as building new cottages, a dining hall, and a church. These clearly show the influence of the American Women's Club movement. Matilda Vanderpoel and others also began purchasing cabins in the area. By 1935, Bluebirds had made 5,000 visits, some members purchasing their own property in Boulder and Gold Hill. Gold Hill was revived not only through real estate, but with money spent in local entertainment like horseback rides, ice cream cones, and in newly opened businesses. An anonymous writer in a 1941 bulletin remembers spending good old Chicago money on Coca-Cola, 7-Up, Dr. Pepper, ice cream, and Coors brewed from sparkling mountain waters, and at the Gold Hill Cafe. As transportation improved and more visitors came, one could now take day trips to Boulder Falls, hop aboard a narrow gauge for a trip on the Switzerland Railroad to Eldora, or take a trip to deserted gold mines. Some Bluebirds did 3-day hikes and camping trips to Arapahoe Peak Glacier at 14,000 feet elevation, until the glacier was closed to hiking. There were longer trips available to Denver, Colorado Springs, and Estes Park. Jean Sherwood was quoted in the Christian Science Monitor as saying, "Day after day, girls would come worn out and hopeless, too tired to do anything for a week but sleep and eat, and at the end of another week, full of life and spirit and eager to climb every mountain in sight." Prowling around the mountains was believed to help with digestion and sleep. After Jean Sherwood died at the Bluebird Cottage in Boulder at 92 in 1930, the Bluebirds carried on. Some social restrictions on women traveling loosened a bit in the 1960s, and younger women lost interest in the Bluebirds. In 1957, the Bluebird Cottage was sold to a UC Boulder professor and his wife. For a couple more years, Bluebirds still came to Boulder and stayed in Chautauqua cabins. In 1962, the Bluebird Lodge and Dining Hall in Gold Hill was sold to a Gold Hill family who turned the dining hall into the fine Gold Hill Inn, still open seasonally today for food and music. The original lodge is only rented out for special occasions. The Holiday House Association formally disbanded in 1966 and dispersed any remaining assets to a do-good nonprofit organization. In the 50 years that the Bluebird organization and the Holiday House Association operated, they brought thousands of working women together to the Colorado wilderness, where they toured, rode, hiked, made friends, played and listened to music, created art, wrote, had classes in literature, all while enjoying the clean air, dry climate, and exhilarating panoramas of our beautiful area of Colorado. So now, perhaps there is a chance that Chicago does pop into your mind when thinking about Colorado. Listen in next time to the Mountain Ear Podcast for more mountain history, lore, or stories. I'm Maryann Rosen. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Maryann. And that's all for today's show. If you like the episode or know anyone from Chicago who might need a push to get out of the city, at least, make sure to share this episode with your friends, family, and neighbors. The best promoters for our show are you, our listeners. So help us get the word out. We appreciate it. And make sure you like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to get the most up-to-date news the moment it hits your airwaves. As always, if you have any tips or you just want to chat, drop me a line at tyler@themountainear.com. We'll be featuring content from our new arts and culture publication, Caribou Current, in the coming weeks. So if you like books, music, art, food, you name it, you won't want to miss these episodes. We can't wait to share it with you. This is the Mountaineer Podcast. I'm Tyler Hickman. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
And that's it for our show. Subscribe online to get more access to more news, weekly updates to our community calendar, and a link to our YouTube channel by visiting themountaineer.com. Be sure to use the coupon code PODCAST when subscribing for a 10% discount, only available to our listeners. If you are in the local peak-to-peak area, be sure to pick up a print edition of The Mountaineer at a local business. I'm Dango Rose. Thank you for listening.